It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome in to a brand spanking new edition of Rico Brogna. We got a lot to cover today. Today is one of my favorite and least favorite episodes of the season. It is the beginning of spring training. We are all here. We are all excited. We've heard from David Stearns. We've heard from Carlos Mendoza. And now, before we get any more injury news, we are going to predict the opening day 26-man roster. We will do that on today's edition of the Rico. Plus, I'll play you a couple of interesting things said by Mets manager Carlos Mendoza on day one of spring training. So here's where we are entering the spring. We obviously got the Francisco Lindor news. It was made official on Wednesday that he's going to need surgery to fix his hamate bone issue in his left hand that he's dealing with. This is odd because it seems like other players around baseball are dealing with the same thing. After hearing about Lindor, we heard about Corbin Carroll. We heard about Jackson Holliday. So for whatever reason, this seems to be the injury of choice in spring of 2026. But the news of Lindor needing surgery is not a surprise. On the last edition of the Rico, when reacting to that breaking news, we assumed this was going to happen, especially when David Stearns said, hey, the timetable is 6 weeks. We still expect him to be ready for opening day. It was certainly not a surprise that he's going to need this surgery. So where do things stand? I don't know if he's going to be ready for opening day. I think the fact that Stearns is confident in it doesn't lead me to believe he's going to be ready for opening day, but certainly leads me to believe that barring any kind of crazy setback, he's going to play early in the season. And if it's the third day of the season or the fifth day of the season or a week into the season, that really is not a big deal. You know, as much as opening day is expensive and opening day is an event, and it would be great to have Lindor in the lineup, if he's down in extended spring training, giving himself a few extra days, it is not the end of the world. I think the question about Lindor is going to be, how does this affect him? And how do we as Met fans even determine if it's affecting him? Because Lindor, as we all know, is a slow starter. We've seen that a lot throughout his Met career. This is the kind of injury where, for some players, it saps their power. I mean, it's a legitimate question. It's what affected Alvarez last year and has affected other players. As I've said before, you can still be a very productive player without power. You know, Francisco Lindor hits .295 in April, gets on base 38% of the time, but only hits one home run. We will live, especially if he's going to be the leadoff hitter, which we'll spend a little bit more time later on in the podcast talking about. So even if there is a lack of power and it affects him, as long as he's productive, we'll be okay. And let's say it does sap his power, and let's say he isn't productive for the first month of the season. How do we know if that's the injury or if that's just Francisco Lindor getting off to a lousy start? Because it's happened to him many times before. So I said on Evan and Tiki a few days ago that this is one of those injuries, while it's not the biggest deal in the world in terms of him affecting a big part of the season, it is a big deal because we don't know how long the effect is going to take place. You know, we're sitting here in the middle of April and he's hitting 195. I mean, you can bet your bottom dollar, whether it's here or on WFAN or on social media, a lot of Met fans are going to be looking at the injury as the reason why. I'm here to tell you with a clear head on February 12th, we'll have no idea because it could be Lindor having a slow start. It could be Lindor missing a big chunk of spring training, or it could be this injury. With that said, no one wants to hear about injuries early in a season, especially to one of your best players. It is the nature of the game. And we have to expect here at the beginning of spring that there's going to be more. Now, hopefully they're not going to be major. Hopefully they're not going to be injuries that keep guys out for half a season. And then we're going to be sitting here in July saying, ooh, it's like a trade acquisition. But this is a big part of spring training. All you got to do is look around the sport. We've seen so many big injuries here in the early going. So obviously the Lindor story is huge. The next thing I'm looking at before we even get to the right field competition with obviously Juan Soto moving to left field, which I discussed in the last Rico. I don't think there's anything to add to it. It's a move I agree with. I thought the explanations were clunky, but who cares at this point? He's the left fielder. I like the move. This is a move I wanted a year and a half ago here on the Rico, so I am certainly not going to complain about it. We move on. Juan Soto's the left fielder, and now we just shift from left field competition to right field competition. That's it. Not a big deal. So before we get into even Carson Bench and what he needs to do to win the job, the next thing I am looking for is over the next 2 weeks to not hear about any soreness or discomfort from any of the 6 starting pitchers. Because we're about to predict a 26-man roster, and I was racking my brain. Like, all right, if I'm going to predict the 26-man roster, am I doing it in this naive world in which everybody's healthy? Or am I actually going to take into account that everyone's not going to be healthy? And I hope I'm wrong when I say this, but I would be stunned if we're sitting here on March 26th, March 27th, talking about a full 6-man rotation. I'd be surprised by that. You're telling me everyone's getting out of spring healthy? So what I look for in the early going is, can everyone get through their first bullpen sessions, the first week or two, without any kind of discomfort? I don't want to hear how minor it is, anything, because if you have any kind of setback, even as early as February 12th and February 13th and February 14th, it probably keeps you from being in the rotation to start the year. Because that plan that you're on as a starting pitcher is so meticulous and so by the day that if you miss a week, you are getting pushed back to start the year. So I am now staring at every update when it comes to how does Sean Manaea feel? How does Nolan McLean feel? How does Kodai Senga feel? David Pitt, the whole crew. But to answer the question of predicting a 26-man roster and taking into account injuries, I am going to predict to you, and I hope I'm wrong. This is not something I want to be right about. I am predicting that 2 starting pitchers are going to start the year on the injured list. 2. I am not going to predict which ones. I think that's wrong. I ain't going to say who it is because I don't know, and I certainly hope it's nobody. But as I predict the 26-man roster today here on the Rico Brogna, I am going to assume that 2 of their 6 starting pitchers are going to start the year on the injured list. I'm not telling you they're out for the year or it's something as crazy as Tommy John. I certainly hope not. But I think it would be naive on this podcast or on any radio show to say, all right, here's the roster, and I'm going to assume everyone's healthy. When does that happen? So the 6 starting pitchers, of course, we speak of are Freddie Peralta, Nolan McLean, Clay Holmes, David Peterson, Sean Manaea, and Kodai Senga. I am going to assume that 2 of them are going to start this season on the injured list, hopefully with minor stuff, but they will not be on the team. So that's where we begin this 26-man roster prediction. Because of that, I do believe that Tobias Myers, who's going to be stretched out, the Mets are going to treat him as a depth starting pitcher, just in case. I believe that Tobias Myers will start the season in the New York Mets rotation. And there will be 5 starters. So that gives me 8 spots in my bullpen to fill out. Obviously, once the Mets are healthy, once guys come back, that can change. I expect that it will change. But to start the season, and we will save the tape on this and find out how right or wrong I am. Because here's the reason I'm doing this. Last year, when we did the 26-man roster predictions, I said, I don't want to take injury into account. I'm just going to assume everybody's healthy. And then we got to the start of the year and where's Sean Manaea? You know what I mean? I don't want to do that again. Because I know better. You know better. I know better. We all know better. It's spring training. Guys are going to get hurt. So I'm being, I think, reasonable, maybe even a little conservative, saying it's only 2 guys. But I believe that when spring has been settled, it will be a 5-man rotation that will include Tobias Myers. So I don't think the gymnastics we are asking David Stearns to perform, such as, what happens? Is it a 6-man rotation? Does this guy? None of that's going to happen, at least to start the season. So 5 starting pitchers, including Tobias Myers. And you guys at home can come up with the 2 starting pitchers that are going to start the year on the injured list. Kodai Senga. I'm just kidding. I have no idea. Maybe it's the guys we least expect. I know who we don't want it to be. I think if we needed to protect 2 or 3 starting pitchers and say, I don't want them on the injured list to start the year, clearly Freddie Peralta and Nolan McLean would be highlighting that list. And remember this about Nolan McLean, and I don't love it, but I get it. Nolan McLean's pitching in the WBC. And I'm not one to stand in the way of guys pitching in the World Baseball Classic. I think it is a cool event. I like the event. It's great for baseball, great, blah, 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 blah. When you are a rookie, and he is still a rookie, and you're a pitcher where everything is so meticulous in terms of getting ready for the start of the season, I don't love it. Like, I don't love that. Juan Soto, of course. I mean, he's one of the great players in baseball, playing for the DR. He's a position player. That's a no-biggie spot. But the Nolan McLean thing, I admit, I do not love. That's just me. So let's get to the bullpen. We have 8 bullpen spots to fill. Let's start with the absolute locks, barring new injuries. Devin Williams will be in the bullpen. Brooks Raley will be in the bullpen. Luke Weaver will be in the bullpen, and Luis Garcia will be in the bullpen. Those are 4 guys. They are on major league contracts. They do not have options. They are in the New York Mets bullpen, barring injury. I did not include A.J. Minter because David Stearns revealed at his spring training beginning press conference, when asked about A.J. Minter, that he expects an early May return. So the idea of A.J. Minter obviously breaking with the team north, that has completely been ruled out. You know, when you've got the GM, team president, saying early May, that's not late March. So we will put A.J. Minter to the side. And so that leaves the New York Mets, in my opinion, with 4 of 8 spots pretty much locked up barring injury. And one of the 4 is a left-handed reliever. Keep that in mind, because I would then assume in the next 4, there's going to be a left-handed reliever that's going to make the team. So those are my 4 predictions. I am not going to predict any more injuries outside of what we already did with the rotation. Not going to do that with the bullpen arms. So those 4 guys, Devin Williams, Brooks Raley, Luke Weaver, Luis Garcia, they are the 4 locks. I've already included Tobias Myers, so take him out. He's in the rotation. He's one of the 5 guys in the rotation. Then you've got a guy who I would say is very close to being a lock, but I wouldn't call him a lock because he has an option left, and that's Huascar Brazoban. When you go back to 2025 and you go through all the relievers that the Mets employed that year, and you were ranking maybe the most reliable after Edwin Diaz, because Edwin was obviously number 1, you had a lot of up and downs, right? You had Tyler Rogers late in the year. You had Reed Garrett pitch really well for a while till he got hurt. And you had Huascar Brazoban. Brazoban had a lot of good moments last year. This is going to be his 3rd year now with the Mets. It's crazy to think he still has options, but he does. And because he has options, I put him in that non-guarantee category. With that said, I do believe he'll make the team. So spot number 5 will go to Huascar Brazoban. Spot number 6 is going to be a lefty, right? I do think that they are going to take another lefty north along with Brooks Raley. So let's go through some of our options right now. In terms of the guys that are on the 40-man roster, we really don't have any. Oh, Brian Hudson. Brian Hudson is a guy they just picked up. They claimed him off waivers. I think Brian Hudson is a legitimate candidate to be that second lefty. The other guy to keep an eye on is Joe Jakes. Remember him? He's the left-hander who was a non-roster invitee. Brandon Waddell, we remember him from last year. He's another non-roster invitee. I would lean towards Brian Hudson being the guy. He's the newest addition. He had success 2 years ago out of the bullpen. So I think because of the injury to Minter, and because Brooks Raley, to me, is not your typical lefty reliever in terms of I bring him in to get the big lefty out, which I know you do less of these days with the 3-batter minimum, but I look at Raley as just a really good relief pitcher who happens to throw with his left hand. I do think there's going to be a priority on another lefty making this bullpen, and right now my guess would be Brian Hudson. So that gets us to 6. Ooh, 2 more spots left now in building this Met bullpen. So here are the guys on the 40, and all of these guys have options. So all of these guys can be sent down to the minor leagues. Keep that in mind. You've got Alex Carrillo, who we saw briefly last year. We have Joey Gerber, who they brought in during the offseason. We got Justin Hagenman, who oddly looks like Hoffman. We've got Jonathan Pintaro. We got Dylan Ross. Dylan Ross is the guy that most of us are probably going to want to have make the team. He is a guy with probably the most potential of any of these bullpen arms we talked about. My guess is he's not going to make the team. My guess is that we will see him a lot in 2026, but I don't think it's going to be to start the season. I think the fact he has options will allow David Stearns to say, you know what, I'm going to be a little bit more conservative with Dylan. He's going to start the year in the minor leagues. Before I get on my soapbox and scream and yell that Dylan Ross needs to be on this team, let's see him do that in spring training to make us jump on the soapbox. This is the kind of year where guys can earn those spots. They can make it obvious they need to be on the team. Who was the guy? I think it was Nate Lavender a couple of years ago, and then they ended up losing him, and Lavender is now back coming off of an injury. I think he was one of the guys that we were screaming and yelling about, and then unfortunately he just had options, and he didn't make the team. So my guess with Dylan Ross, again, this is a projection, not Evan Roberts rules the world. My projection is Dylan Ross is going to start the year in the minor leagues, and we will see him on that Syracuse shuttle at some point early in the season. Christian Scott will start the year in the minors. Jonah Tong will start the year in the minors. Austin Warren's interesting. We saw him a little bit last year, actually pitched okay. He's another guy on the 40-man roster with options. Here are the non-roster invitees, and these are very, very interesting because these are the guys that I think almost have a little bit of a leg up. Some of them do, especially if you lose them. I want to start with Craig Kimbrell. I know that Craig Kimbrell is not a guy we love based on his history against us. He's been a part of some Met moments over the last decade plus. It was funny. It was a few Ricos ago. We played that old clip of me and Joe talking about, I don't even know what the hell we were talking about. And at some point, we brought up Craig Kimbrell and how old he was. And that was 6 years ago. So it's been a while. Give him credit. He's hung around. I think he's making the team. I really do. I think he's making the team for two reasons. Number one, if he doesn't make the team, he's gone. Right? Craig Kimbrell's not going to Syracuse, I don't think. So I think he's got that leg up just based on if you want him on the team or if you want him to help at any point this season, he's going to have to make the team. And I think he's going to be impressive. Carlos Mendoza was raving about his changeup the other day. I don't know if Kimbrell's going to last the whole season. And maybe it's ideal for Craig Kimbrell to follow the David Robertson mold of don't pitch in the first half of the season and then come back for the second half. But either way, he's going to make this or try to make this team. I think he will. I think because of his resume, because of his experience, I believe he's going to make this team. Now, he's got to pitch well and he's got to stay healthy. So those are two things that haven't happened yet. But as we sit here in the middle of February, if I had to project the 26-man roster, I fully expect that Craig Kimbrell is going to be on the team. So that leaves us one open spot. If you are scoring at home, I'll go through it real quick. We're talking Met bullpen. Remember, 13 spots with pitchers. I've already projected 5 rotation arms. 2 starters will start the year on the IL, and Tobias Myers will enter the rotation. So that leaves a bullpen of Devin Williams, Brooks Raley, Luke Weaver, Luis Garcia. That's 4. I have Huascar Brazaban being 5, and I've got left-handed reliever Brian Hudson being 6, and now I have Craig Kimbrell being number 7. Now I get to number 8, and I lean towards it being somebody, especially because Myers I have inserted to the rotation based on this weird injury game, that the guy who's the 8th man is a guy who can give you multiple innings. So somebody who can come in and not just get 3 outs, but get 6 outs or 7 outs or 8 outs. That's the role that I think Tobias Myers would have if he doesn't make the team in the rotation. So I go through some of the non-rosters. Albert Alzolay, remember they picked him up last year, rehabbing him. Mike Ballman, Nick Burdi, Carl Edwards, Kevin Herget. We mentioned Nate Lavender is back. Anderson Severino, Robert Stock, Brandon Waddell. Those are some of the non-roster invitees. But I look at the guys on the 40-man roster, and I see Justin Hagenman, who I mentioned a little bit earlier, and I see Austin Warren. And those are the 2 guys on the 40 that I can see filling the role I just described. Remember, Hagenman was one of those spot starters when the Mets were desperate for innings early July. They were in a real desperation mode. Now, I think Waddell fits this too, but right now Hagenman is on the 40-man. So if I had to guess right now, I think it is a longish reliever, and I'm going to go with Justin Hagenman. Justin Hagenman is going to be my 8th guy to make this Met roster. So again, here is my projected 26, a month and a half out. I'm already projecting 2 injuries to the rotation. I'm going to keep the bullpen relatively healthy outside of the injury we know to A.J. Minter. My 8 bullpen arms will be Devin Williams, Brooks Raley, Luke Weaver, Luis Garcia, Brian Hudson, Huascar Brazaban, Craig Kimbrell, and Justin Hagenman. Pete Hoffman, I'll ask you this to you 2 ways. Do you agree with my projection, and do you like my projection? Because there may be some names you don't like that I just said.
I think it's not that I don't like. I do agree pretty much with everything you said, especially with the pitching. Someone's going to get hurt. I don't want to sit there and say, oh, who it is. But you're right. Kodai Senga is not going to start the season. But that being said, though, the bullpen, the one name that I disagree with you on, and it's because of the option piece, I think Brazaban will start in the minors because and it's now just thinking about David Stearns, how he manipulates rosters, how he does everything. That option piece is a game changer for him. So let him start in the minors. Totally fine. I think you'll see a guy like Alzolay. I think he's somebody who, when he was on his game with Chicago, one of the best like closers that season that before he got hurt or whatever it was.
Yep.
I could see him maybe impressing enough to make the roster. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was on the opening day roster.
I like that one because I think that's a real possibility. I'll walk you through why I stayed away from him. I need to see him pitch. Like, he is coming off a major injury. We didn't see him last year. So could I see a scenario where he's getting healthy, but he starts the year on the injured list? Absolutely. But I think he's definitely a name to keep an eye on. I think he's certainly one of the guys that could make this team. And look, what we just projected includes really creating a spot based on the injuries we talked about. So there could be one less spot available. If everybody's healthy, I think Tobias Myers makes the team, even though he's got options. I don't think they're going to play the option game with everybody. I think Myers is too valuable. And if you've got 6 starters, plus you've got Tobias Myers, that gets you to 7, which means there's only 6 open spots. And then when you do it that way, now you have less kind of names to look at. But I do think if we're framing this, there's a lefty argument, because I do think they are going to pick a second lefty. That's where Joe Jakes comes to play. That's where Brian Hudson comes to play. That's where Brandon Waddell comes to play, I guess. Like, I think you've got your lefty that they're going to want to have, a long man if it's not Tobias Myers, and then, maybe that veteran like Craig Kimbrell or Adbert Alzolay, who could have a big impact on this bullpen.
But this is why I lean toward Hudson too, because he, David Stearns clearly has a preference on guys he likes. He has familiarity with them in Milwaukee, so I feel like he eyes him as somebody that is a innings eater who will be able to be that lefty out of the bullpen. Will give him innings whenever need be. That's the guy he's going to go to. I think that he's a lock for this roster. You said it earlier.
Do you want, and I ask this to all Met fans, I ask it to you, do you want Craig Kimbrell to make this team?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Couple reasons why. Not just the fact that he's a veteran and that I think he's, has experience and can actually pitch. Given the ball in the 7th or 8th or 9th inning, as long as his stuff is still working, he gives us the best opportunity to get out of jams. No question about it. But also what I've really learned now with these veterans, it's like the Justin Verlander in San Francisco last year. I know it didn't work out great, but his presence, what he could teach these young kids, I think that's huge. I think that knowledge is amazing.
I expect that Kimbrell makes this team and pitches well for a while and then falls off a cliff. Like, that's my natural expectation for what happens with Craig Kimbrell. Like, he will be good at moments, and at times I would be surprised if we are looking at a full season of Craig Kimbrell where we're like, damn, I trust him. So that's my expectation, but that'll be very interesting.
But that's why you keep him on the team to open the roster.
Season, I'm not disagreeing with you. Like, here's how I feel about it. Go pitch well. It's the same thing I said about Dylan Ross. Go dominate. Go pitch your ass off. And then when we're sitting here in late March and we saw you deliver, we saw you pitch, and it's not just performance, it's stuff, it's how you look, then we'll all jump on tables and demand guys make the team. And hopefully that is the case with Craig Kimbrell. You want more good options than anything. Let's look at the position players. This one is a little bit more straightforward. 13 position player spots. Could there be 14? Yes, but we never see teams do that. Again, the rules, the 26-man roster rules to start the year are 13 position players, 13 pitchers, or a max of 13 pitchers. So you could technically carry 12 pitchers and have 14 position players, but very few teams do that. And I certainly don't expect the Mets to do that. So let's take a look at the locks. Assuming health, Francisco Alvarez and Luis Torrens are your 2 catchers. If any one of them gets hurt, Hayden Senger is on the 40-man roster. He'll make the team. Austin Barnes is a non-roster invitee. My expectation with Barnes is he is here in case there's an injury. There's always that chance he goes to Syracuse, accepts an invitation there. And God forbid, knock on wood, there's injuries, what have you. Austin Barnes could help this team at some point. But as of right now, hopefully everybody's healthy. That's been Alvarez's biggest problem, clearly. We remember it last year when he had the hamate bone issue and all the hand issues he had late in the season. Francisco Alvarez, Luis Torrens are your catchers. As far as your infielders are concerned, Bo Bichette, Francisco Lindor, more on him in a minute, Marcus Semien, Jorge Polanco, and Mark Vientos. We will include Brett Beatty as an infielder if you'd like. That gets you to 6. 6 plus 2 is 8. That means we now have 5 more open spots for this team because all of those guys are locks. Now, in terms of who has options, Francisco Alvarez technically has options, so he could start the year in the minor leagues. I don't really see that happening. I mean, Alvarez would have to have like just an abysmal spring training, but even if he does, I've talked about it during the offseason. I can see a scenario where Torrens just plays more, where he's more in the rotation of just starting more often because of his defense and clutch hitting and Alvarez's struggles. But despite Francisco having options, and we seeing him in the minor leagues a year ago, don't think that's a possibility. And the other one's Brett Beatty. Brett Beatty still has options. The only scenario where Beatty starts the year in the minors is if they're not comfortable with his outfield defense and they just want to get him more reps. But I doubt that's going to happen either. So I think those guys, despite having options, are a lock. So we've got ourselves 8 locks before we get to the outfield. Now, in the outfield, we have Luis Robert Jr., we've got Juan Soto, and we've got Tyrone Taylor. Those are your other options. So that gets us to 11. All right, so we have 2 open roster spots to kind of look at. One of them will be another outfielder. I know Brett Beatty counts as an outfielder in a way, but I think the next guy is an outfielder. If Carson Bench makes the team, well, that's pretty simple. It's Carson Bench, who is not currently on the 40-man roster, but not that complicated. He'd be added. The other guys on the 40-man roster, Vidal Brujan, Ronnie Mauricio, MJ Melendez, who does have options. That's why I didn't bring his name up yet. Nick Morabito, Jared Young. And we mentioned Hayden Senger. I think MJ Melendez does make the team. I think that if Benj makes the team, there's a greater possibility that the Mets would put MJ in the minor leagues because of that option. But I think if Benj doesn't make the team, you're looking at Melendez. Now, this is a projection podcast, so I guess the question is, all right, Evan, are you projecting Carson Bench to make the Mets roster? My answer to that is yes, I am. And I'm not saying it because I just want to be positive. I'm saying it because David Stearns went out of his way early in this offseason to make it absolutely clear that he has a chance to make the team. It was not pried out of him. It wasn't a question 18 different ways. Like, he made it very, very crystal clear that they love this kid, they're high on this kid, and despite the limited amount of at-bats he had at AAA and the limited success he had at AAA, they believe in him. I believe if Carson Bench is decent, he makes this team. So as part of this projection, we're going to put Carson Bench on this team. That gets us to 6 plus 4 is 10 plus 2 is 12. That leaves us one spot. That's where MJ Melendez is not a mortal lock. He does give you the versatility. He's caught before. He's played some first base. We talk about position versatility. They talk about position versatility. I think he's got the leg up, but I think that Lindor's injury, and this is where this plays a part, assuming he's active and ready, leads to a fair question, which is, who's the backup shortstop? Now, we had this discussion last year, if you guys remember, in spring training, and it was all about, do they have to carry a backup shortstop versus if Lindor got hurt, are they comfortable for putting someone there for a few innings? Last year it was Jeff McNeil, and then, okay, he's hurt the next day, you make the corresponding roster move to call up a guy that can play shortstop. What is a little bit different about this discussion today versus then is, A, the Mets have guys on their roster who've played shortstop in their career. Now, they're not doing it anymore, and there may be a hesitation to doing it again, but not just Bo Bichette, who's obvious. Marcus Semien was a shortstop. Jorge Polanco was a shortstop. Like, if you're talking about a few innings or even a game here and there, are you opposed to moving one of those guys to shortstop? Or do you want someone on this roster who's played the position? Let's just stick with the guys who've played the position before we get into the idea of moving any of these veterans. Vidal Brujan, I think, is the leader in that clubhouse. He's on the 40-man roster as of now, though that can change based on the way the Mets are manipulating their roster right now with guys going on the 60-day IL. Either way, Vidal Brujan is likely to be in this competition. So you got him. And as far as other guys you have, and these are the names that Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns mentioned, Greg Kessinger, Jackson Clough, and Christian Arroyo. Those are the 3 non-roster invitees they mentioned. Jackson Clough is a 29-year-old career minor leaguer, can play shortstop, left-handed hitter. Greg Kessinger is another guy who's bounced around. He's played a little bit of shortstop. And then Christian Arroyo is the guy we're more familiar with because he's a former top prospect. He's been in the major leagues a lot. He's a 30-year-old who's played third. He's played short. He's bounced all the way around. All of those guys are not on the 40-man roster. So I don't see them making this team unless Lindor begins on the IL. And I do believe, I'm going to project Lindor is going to start the year on the IL, but before anybody freaks out on me, I'm doing it on a few-day basis. I do not think that this is a long-term thing. My projection is that they're going to backdate an IL stint based on his recovery from the hamate bone injury, and he's going to basically miss the first week of the season. I said that on Evan and Tiki, and I stand by that, and that is not a you're being negative opinion. I'm being realistic based on the timeline. Like, for Lindor to be ready for opening day, he's got to just make that 6-week period on the day. And I don't doubt Lindor's toughness. He has shown that in his time at the major league level. But I also think the Mets have to be smart. So I think one of these guys, and I'm going to go with Vidal Brujan, is going to make the team out of spring training to get 5 days to a week of playing a little bit of shortstop until Lindor is ready. And I do think MJ Melendez will make the team. So, in conclusion, for the position players, here are my 13 position players. Hopefully I'm counting right. Francisco Alvarez, 1. Luis Torrens, 2. Bo Bichette, 3. Francisco Lindor, 4. Marcus Semien. Let me take that back. I said Lindor on the IL. Let me start over. It can be complicated. Francisco Alvarez, 1. Luis Torrens, 2. Bo Bichette, 3. Marcus Semien, 4. Jorge Polanco, 5. Mark Vientos, 6. Brett Beatty, 7. Luis Robert Jr., 8. Juan Soto, 9. Tyrone Taylor, 10. Carson Benj, 11. MJ Melendez, 12. And I do believe Vidal Brujan will be number 13 just to start the season. And then when Lindor comes back, he goes down. And I do believe the Mets will employ hey, Lindor's going to play every day because even with this injury, I don't see him coming back and sitting once or twice a week. As much as I've suggested it, Mendy doesn't do it. They believe in this guy. He wants to play every day. He's going to play every day. And I think that if there is an injury in game, you are looking at either Bo Bichette going over there for a few innings, which I'm not in love with, Marcus Semien, Jorge Polanco, or maybe more likely than not, Brett Beatty going over there for just a few innings, clear up the rest of the game, and then if it's something that keeps him out for multiple days, one of the aforementioned guys from the minor leagues would come up. I do not believe it's Ronnie Mauricio. I think that Ronnie Mauricio needs to play every day. I believe that, and I think the Mets believe that. That is a big part of why they protected the option year on Mauricio a year ago to allow him to spend a lot of time in AAA. I think a fair question that should absolutely be asked is, okay, if Ronnie's going to the minor leagues, where does he play? Does he play third base, where the Mets just signed Bo Bichette? Does he play second base, where the Mets have Marcus Semien here for the next few years? Does he go back to his natural position as shortstop just in case Lindor gets hurt? Does he learn first base, which feels like a more open position? Do you stick him in the outfield? I think those are all very fair questions about Ronnie Mauricio. So that's my projected 26-man roster. But let me keep it right here with Ronnie Mauricio. I mentioned at the beginning of the Rico Brogna that Carlos Mendoza met the media on Wednesday. And instead of playing every question, every answer, I pulled a few that I thought were interesting. Number one, about Ronnie Mauricio. So Ronnie Mauricio obviously has missed a lot of time over the last couple of years. And a year ago was pretty much here at the major league level after he got off to that really hot start in the minor leagues and didn't play a lot. So a fair question that needs to be asked, and it was of Carlos Mendoza, is your comfort level with Ronnie Mauricio playing shortstop? Because if Lindor's injury turned into some kind of long-term injury, or even not long-term, a 2 to 3 week into the season injury, and you don't want Vidal Brujan playing the position, or Greg Kessinger playing the position, or jerking around Bo Bichette, what about Ronnie Mauricio? So here's the question and answer in regards to the comfort level they have on Ronnie Mauricio playing his once natural position of shortstop.
Mauricio getting reps at shortstop, he hasn't done a whole lot of that since the knee injury. How much could that impact him, or would it impact him?
Well, the good thing is he finally fully healthy. For the past couple of years, he's not on a running progression. He's not on doing backfield activity. He's a full player for us. He play a lot of winning ball. And yeah, he's one of those where he hasn't played there much, and we're going to have to get him ready. But he's so used to, he came up as a shortstop. It's not something that you'll forget. As long as he's healthy, which he is, I don't think that's going to be an issue.
What I would do with Mauricio is I would play him a lot of shortstop just in case. Obviously, Lindor's here for a very long time, but I would want to get him back familiar with his natural position. And then first base would be the other position I would really push him to play. Because think about this long term, but also short term for this season. Marcus Semion's going to be here for a few years. Bo Bichette may only be here for a year, so it's very possible and even likely that Ronnie Mauricio's next opportunity with the Mets could be at third base. But first base is the most open position in terms of now and in the future. Like, who is the first baseman of the New York Mets in the next couple of years? They have Ryan Clifford. Ryan Clifford has played outfield. He's played first base. He is absolutely an option and a guy to keep an eye on. Jorge Polanco's here for 2 years, but there's no guarantee he's playing first base. Brett Baty could certainly become the first baseman. So I would want Mauricio to play first base, to play shortstop, to play a little bit more third base. I'm comfortable with him at third base, so I don't think it needs to be something he does all the time. The other avenue for Mauricio to get at-bats this year would be DH, because the DH spot right now is what? Mark Vientos, Jorge Polanco when he's not playing first, Brett Baty when he's not playing first. But I like the idea of Mauricio kind of reacclimating himself to shortstop just in case. Because if this is an injury or there's another injury, because Lindor's getting older, you never know. I think for an extended period of time, we would all much more like to see Ronnie Mauricio at shortstop than Vidal Brujan. Speaking of shortstop, let's get to Bo Bichette. I made my opinion very clear. I have no interest in Bo Bichette playing shortstop unless Lindor was out for a significant period of time. I believe Bo Bichette needs to learn third base. He needs to focus on third base. Shifting over to shortstop is not something I would really be interested in doing. With that said, Carlos Mendoza was asked about Bo Bichette moving back to shortstop.
Is there any world in which you would give Bichette shortstop reps?
As of right now, that's not on the table. But again, this is a guy that's played shortstop. So if we got to get to that point, that transition is not going to be as hard, So right now we have to make sure we get him comfortable at third base, and that's where he's going to be getting his work defensively.
I think his answer is actually very similar to what I've been saying, which is unless something major happened, and that's not the case with this hamate injury where Lindor's out for 3 months and you're talking about a long-term kind of solution at shortstop, that's where you start to consider it. Now, for an inning or two, like I mentioned earlier, like they don't really have a backup shortstop once Lindor is healthy. He gets hurt in the 6th inning of the game. I have less of an issue shifting Semien, Bichette, Polanco, any one of those 3 guys over there. I also mentioned Brett Baty as an option to do that for a few innings, and then the following day, you call up a real shortstop. That was something that was certainly considered last year. Luis Angel Acuna ended up making the team. By the way, did you guys realize that Luis Angel Acuna was a switch hitter and we had no idea? That is a joke. The White Sox general manager on 3 different occasions has referred to Luis Angel Acuna as a shortstop. I'm sorry, not as a shortstop, as a switch hitter, which does not look good. If you were the GM of a team, imagine David Stearns just walking around being like, yeah, Carson Bench, switch hitter. We'd be like, no, he's not. Like, what are you talking about? So luckily our team president doesn't make that mistake, but that's been going on in Chicago with Luis Angel Acuna. And one last question for Mendy that I thought was interesting. Again, it was asked of him the lineup. How do you foresee the top of this lineup looking, especially when Francisco Lindor is healthy?
You were saying you were playing around with potential top of the lineup configurations. Have you settled on anything 1 through 4, and does Lindor's injury impact any of it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been getting the question about the top 3 and top 4. Lindor is down now, but I'm still leaning that way. If Lindor's healthy and ready to go, he's probably going to be Lindor, Soto, Bichette. And then maybe, yeah, I got good choices there. I can play around with lefty, righty, lefty if we need to. Load up lefties, load up righties. But yeah, feel good with the options that we got here.
It's funny because of this hamate bone injury and the idea that it does sap power from players, which is something discussed about anyone who has this injury. It makes Lindor as a leadoff hitter make even more sense. As much as having power from your leadoff spot is nice and it's an added bonus at the top of your lineup, I do put more of a premium on power from my 2 and 3 hitters than my leadoff hitter, considering they may come up with guys on base. So from that perspective, this hamate bone issue and the fact it may impact him early in the season leads me more to Mendy's camp of leading off Lindor, something I have not been as in favor of. I've been more of a Soto leadoff guy. but the injury actually moves me more in that direction. But he's made very clear, Mendy, that Lindor, Soto, Bichette is how he plans on lining it up, 1, 2, 3. On Friday, or at least we'll do it live Friday on YouTube, and you could download it over the weekend, we're going to do a mailbag edition of the Rico Brogna, so send on over any of your questions or comments, thericob@gmail.com. But I do want to take some time to read some emails now, especially in regards to what we've talked about on the last few Ricos, including Juan Soto's position change. Let's start off with Ryan from New Jersey, who writes, do you think David Stearns told us a little white lie about how the conversation started for moving Soto to left field to not hurt his feelings about his below-average defense? Like you said on the radio and the Rico, Stearns is the smartest guy in the room, and it just seems fishy that Soto in left field was, quote, not something he had contemplated. I look back at how other teams handled asking their star players to move positions due to poor defense, most recently Devers with the Red Sox, and you have to think, why not just avoid the headache and tell the media and fans left field was Juan Soto's idea and not the Mets? It's a great point, Ryan. It really is, and you're not the only one to make it. I think that handling a star player and handling their ego, and Juan Soto certainly has an ego, is something that you have to consider. And maybe that was why he said that. You know, and I don't blame myself, though, for at least reacting to comments that make you feel like, what's that? Why would you not contemplate a move that we talked about a year and a half ago as making a lot of sense? But I think that's a great point, Ryan, that you forget about insulting Nimmo, which I did by talking about his noodle arm, and that one of the issues with moving Soto to left field last year would have been Brandon Nimmo playing right field. Insulting Brandon Nimmo is no longer a big deal. He's not on this team, and you could have done it in a classy way. Any kind of perceived insult of Juan Soto, that could be a problem. So it's a very, very fair point, and I do appreciate that. Matthew writes more on Soto to left field. Evan, I'm confused. Why are we upset Soto's moving to left field? Like we were recognizing Nimmo had a noodle arm, as you said. Nimmo's not on the team. We don't know about Benj, but a former pitcher who maybe is a starting opening day shouldn't have a position where you need a stronger arm. Even if Tyrone Taylor plays right, rather him there than left field, assuming Robert produces in center. And Soto's making the change, but before spring training starts. Why is it too late when we literally have Bichette learning a new position? Soto has at least played the position. Isn't that what spring training is for and the WBC? I never thought it was too late. I think Tiki and I argued about that a little bit when he said the timing was odd or the timing was concerning. I disagree with him. It was the explanation more than anything else. I'm not concerned about Juan Soto in left field. Juan Soto played more games in left field than right field prior to joining the New York Yankees. And I think if I do the math, even going into last year, the split between left and right in his major league career was just about even. So I am not concerned about him learning a position. I don't even think he is learning a position, to be honest with you. It was more what was said. Here's an email about the hamate issue. This is from Bradley. Bradley writes, Evan, I'm a physician and have both talked with hand surgeons I know and have searched the literature about this, and ultimately the whole narrative that it saps people of power is actually false when you look at the data. I prefer to be evidence-based. Ooh, I like this. A study of 261 professional baseball players who had hamate hook escission found 81% return to the same or higher level of play after surgery. The median time to return was 48 days. Traditional hitting stats like batting average, on-base percentage, OPS, declined slightly, but minimally post-surgery. This suggests that while overall hitting performance shows a small drop, likely due to time missed and regression to the mean, there's no clear catastrophic loss of power in the group overall. Another clinical report comparing MLB players' pre- and post-injury batting averages found the mean batting average was 267 pre-injury, 264 post-injury. Not a statistically significant difference. This supports the idea that performance broadly returns to baseline after recovery. Additionally, an independent performance data set looking at isolated power, a stat focused on extra base hit power in players with enough plate appearances, did not show a consistent post-surgery drop. Some players were similar or even higher post-surgery, others lower, but the average actually increased slightly in the sample study. In fact, Francisco Alvarez's bat speed went up when he came back. The reason he sucked was he was swinging at sliders in the opposing batter's box. Like that. I'm encouraged. I think this is a no biggie spot. Love the show, Dr. Brad. Great stuff. Great stuff. I love the evidence. I love the data, and I hope you're right. And you know what this also proves, Dr. Brad? Let's say Lindor does struggle to hit for power when he first comes back. We could cite your data and say it's not the hamate injury, it's April Lindor. So, good piece of info. We appreciate it. Keep the emails coming, the ricob@gmail.com. And I mentioned on the Friday edition of Rico Brogna live on YouTube or wherever you download your podcasts, we'll go full mailbag where we'll hit a variety of subjects. We will also create our 10 biggest spring training questions for the New York Mets. That's an episode coming up. And before you know it, we will have games. And also coming up on Friday, we'll give you an announcement on our trip to spring training and how you guys can be involved. Thank you very much for listening, subscribing, downloading another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.